It was raining cats and dogs.
And you stepped in a poodle.
Not bad, Sammy. It'd been funnier if I'd said it.
I hope he's trained.
Only to kill.
Oh, I didn't know you had company.
Louise, you know my Uncle Arthur.
Of course, how are you?
Hi. Excuse me for not getting up, but my feet are killing me. You wave that fist at me once more and I'll bronze it. Right on your wrist.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was the giant gong of Kyoto that you just heard, out of the mystic lore of the Orient. When it rings, things of utmost importance are about to happen, as they do in the story I'm about to tell you. The fabulous story of Townsend Harris, first white man to open up the Orient, and of the beautiful geisha who was sent to love him and kill him.
Welcome back to a fresh episode of Doing It with Mike Sachs. Happy 2024 and happy Valentine's Month for all who celebrate, especially alone. Let's get right to it, because you're doing it with me. In this episode, I interview an exceptional comedy writer, a friend of mine, Dan Guterman. I interviewed Dan years ago for one of my interview books, Poking a Dead Frog, and he's someone whose work I really admire. He never attended college, or he just took one class, and this was at Concordia University in Montreal. He didn't have any family connections. He just rose up by his own talent and work ethic. From Montreal, where he was living, he started writing headlines for The Onion, writing about 25 headlines per week and being paid $20 per headline. And he could actually unbelievably make a living this way, paying off his $265 a month apartment rent. He then went on to write jokes for my favorite section of The Onion, the horoscopes, which are just perfect little jewels of jokes. He took over this role from the great John Crewson. Here are a few of my favorite horoscopes that Dan wrote. Aries, you'll spend your remaining years hooked up to a machine, which is sad, as it's the kind that checks email and sends out texts. Cancer, everything will go according to plan, except for the injured hostages, the brief shootout with police, and the fact that you were just trying to make toast. Virgo, you've never really thought of yourself as a cat person, but the splicing, transbinding, and DNA resequencing will soon change all of that. Gemini, your tryst with a married woman will come to an end this week when she finally asks you for a divorce. So those are perfect little jokes. In 5 years of writing these horoscopes, Dan produced more than 3,000. That should be a book. From The Onion, he went on to write for Stephen Colbert on The Colbert Report, and then for Dan Harmon at Community, and then Rick and Morty. Not a bad resume. Beyond that, he's contributed to The New Yorker and co-authored 2 Onion books, Our Dumb World and America Again, Rebecoming the Greatness We Never Weren't. About a month ago, an animated 10-episode show that Dan's been working on for years, called Carol and the End of the World, premiered on Netflix. As brilliant as Dan is as a joke writer, the show is more about a feeling, a sensibility. Dan once described his own comedic sensibility as dark and resigned and sad, and also satiric and energetic and not scared. And I think that's a perfect way to describe how the show turned out. It's a product that always leans towards character and truth rather than an easy joke. My interview with Dan, as well as with Martha Kelly, the very funny stand-up comedian and actress who voices the main character Carol, is coming up in just a bit. But first, I'd like to talk to you about a very exciting opportunity that I would love for you all to be a part of. I am asked quite often to travel around the country and talk about writing and comedy and other such matters. I even teach comedy writing up at Humboldt College in Toronto every once in a while, a school that has the only comedy writing major in the world, as far as I know. But I'm not a huge fan of travel. I'm sort of a homebody, a fan of my couch, my record collection, my books, and all that. So, dilemma. I love to teach. How can I continue to do so without having to leave New York? What to do? So I got to thinking recently, and I came out with a major epiphany. Why would it have to be me who has to travel around the country teaching at seminars and classrooms? Why would it have to be me who has to deal with all of the numerous hassles of travel? Waiting in lines forever, taking off my belt, taking off my shoes. Who the fuck needs it all? So, this is where you come in. I would love for you to become one of my smile vessels. What is a smile vessel, you're asking? Let me explain. As one of my smile vessels, you will do everything for me. You will be my contact with the outside world, my ambassador for my comedy nation, the front line spreading smiles. The hard part is over. I've already done it. I've already created it. I've come up with the advice for any comedy writer wannabe. That's the hard part. You don't even have to worry about that. That is done. All you have to do is spread it. And on top of that, you will be paid handsomely. So it would go something like this. You can't make money without first spending some money, right? So the first step would be for you to shoot me some funds for the opportunity to teach my Secrets to Achieving Comedy Success, or SACS, SACS for short. You would then receive half of the proceeds from all ticket sales of any class or symposium that you would set up on your end. Now, I think 50% is more than fair. It is my name going on the title, Mike Sax's Saxes. And it's really the name that sells everything. As with anything, it's the branding that counts. Once you sign up and the funds successfully go through, you will be provided with a special treasure comedy box containing the entire course load and all of my thousands of secrets to making it in the comedy world. The treasure box typically sells for over $2,000. Instead, I'm offering it to you now for $1,496. That's a solid deal. I would grab it. Once in possession of the treasure comedy box, it would then be up to you to find others to teach humor in the Sax way. Now, keep in mind, the more people I have under me teaching, the more money I'd eventually earn. True. But more importantly, the people you have teaching under you, the more money you will eventually earn. It's a win all the way around. If you're still listening, thank yourselves because you're doing the right thing. I'd like to talk next about something I've created called Pushing the Comedy, or PTC. The PTC is a two-sheet poster that you can pre-order now for $199.99. And it explains in minute detail how this will all work. How you can find your own comedic truth tellers, or CTTs, to teach their own students, and for them to find their own, and so on down the inverted pyramid. So let's break this down. From your own comedy truth tellers, you will receive half the money from your team. I'd be taking a quarter of that. This would leave the CTTs, or the subset of laugh teachers, or SLTs, with around 25%, which is an extremely generous payout for a young, unproven teacher of comedy. I'd like to point out that everyone here is a winner. Students will be taught, teachers will be making a shitload of money, and my brand of comedy will spread throughout the world, or at least throughout this country where it is copyrighted. Now, below each subset of SLT will be another subset within a specially designed level system. I'm obviously at the very top as level A. Beneath me will be those who sign up immediately without any questions asked, and these teachers will be known as level B, or the trusted sidekicks, or the TSs. That's why it's so important that you get in early, because if you don't get in early, you'll be known as distrusted sidekicks or DSs until you earn your comedy badge, and you'll remain as distrusted in both name and in payouts. So you got to get in early on this. Beneath that level A, there will be level C, D, E, and so on. Once it reaches level Z, it will then start over, but with double letters. Level double A, level double B, level double C, and so on. Once you've accomplished the Finding the Funny course, now this will be the first provided course and is completely free, you'd officially become what I'm calling a giggle merchant or a GM. That's at the top of the heap. Just below the giggle merchant will be the yellow shirts, and these are teachers who have yet to prove themselves by finding more students than the giggle merchants and the pushers of comedy and the comedy truth tellers. I'm going to call these yellow shirts the YSs. Interspersed among all these tireless comedy pushers or CPs will be what I'll be calling the SWATins, which stands for Stop With All That Negativity. Now, these specialists would be roamers, and they would put the kibosh on anyone allowing any negative thoughts to overtake positive thoughts about a student's path to learning about comedy. These SWATins would be paid per student whom they chastise and send back on the proper comedy path, or PCP. Now, this is something I never mentioned before because I just thought of it, and I'm very excited about this, so I'm going to mention this now. I'm envisioning something that I will be calling the Hot Laugh Zone, or the HLZ, in which a comedy wannabe sits in the midst of a laugh circle and tells jokes and pitches ideas. If those outside the circle do not like what they hear, they would then, for a small price, have the opportunity to throw an object at the hot seat victim. Nothing would hurt these victims, of course, and maybe even be sort of fun, like a foam brick or an unsharpened pencil or a hatchet still within its leather case. The first course will be called Receiving the Comedy, or RTC, and as I said, that will be free. After that first course, which would last for about 30 to 45 straight hours without a bathroom break, the smile vessels, or the SVs, will be given an option to retreat back into the cold, cruel world to make it on their own, or to sign up for a follow-up class in which they truly learn the secrets of achieving great success within the comedic field. If they choose the correct option, and once their money goes through, each smile vessel, or purveyor of humor, or POH, will then be required to purchase a set of audio tapes with my comedic bits of wisdom and advice. That would be 10 cassettes total, costing $1,500. Keep in mind that's $1,500 for one cassette, not for all 10. Once the POHs purchase these cassettes, they'll then be required to purchase 10 videotapes with me lecturing about comedy in front of a green screen. Now, one thing I should probably point out, the video of me in front of the green screen is technically not me in front of a green screen. It's someone I hired from TaskRabbit to fill in for me. Someone I found who is more attractive in the traditional sense, as well as maybe even funnier. I should also point out that if a student buys enough class materials, they get a free duplicate cassette of Dice Rules, the classic Andrew Dice Clay comedy concert. Can I ask you some questions? How do you make it as a comedy writer? How does one acquire a literary agent, a movie agent, a TV agent? How does one land a writing gig on a sitcom? These are all reasonable questions you're asking yourself now that I'm asked a million times a day, but these questions are now something that you can answer with the right attitude and the right course materials. If you are interested, and I hope you are, I can be reached at mikebsachs@gmail.com. By the way, if you ever show any negativity or have too many questions, I will block you. So let's do this. Can we do this? Together, let's turn the world funny, or TWF. Here is my interview now with the writer Dan Guterman and the very funny stand-up comedian and actress Martha Kelly, who voices Carol in their new Netflix animated series, Carol and the End of the World. A lot of listeners out there want to get into television writing, creating, and I wanted to ask you, what exactly goes into putting out a show from its initial idea to pitching it to it eventually coming out?
Oh, it's kind of a nightmare process. Yeah, I mean, it starts with pitching the idea and getting that approved. And then after that, they usually make you write a pilot for it. And you have to then flesh out the world, figure out what the pilot should be, write that up, get them to love the pilot, at which point they'll take their time in greenlighting the series. And then you have to go through the entire process of like hiring every single person you need on your crew and staff in order to make a show. And that takes a lot of, that's a really kind of careful process in order to pick the right people who match sensibility wise with what you're trying to do, match tonally with what you're trying to do. It's incredibly involved. You kind of live the show for a couple of years. But yeah, you do everything from writing all the episodes to handling all the production, the voice acting, the design aspects, the music. Everything is sort of up to you to calibrate and dial in to make sure it all kind of goes according to plan.
Does one need an agent to pitch an idea like this?
It's so different from place to place and person to person and whoever is kind of running the show at whatever studio you're going to. But usually, yeah, in order to pitch a show, you have to have had some experience being on shows, first of all, having a reputation for being a good writer. I'm sure there's stories of people who have been able to pitch and sell stuff without representation, but I think it definitely helps. I got asked to pitch for Netflix because I had been brought in to help them with like 3 or 4 other pilots they were doing based on just my experience on other shows. And it was through consulting on these other shows, on these other pilots that Netflix had, that they wanted to hear what I, was thinking about and what I had to offer.
How many ideas did you pitch to Netflix before one was chosen?
Oh, no, I just pitched one idea. I was helping them with 3 other pilots that other people were working on. I came in to consult on those pilots, but I only pitched them one idea, and it was Carol.
So what was it about this idea? I'm imagining you had been thinking about it for some time before pitching it to Netflix. What was it about this idea that made you want to spend years on it?
It just comes from a pretty personal place. I'm a bit of a workaholic. And, I had the realization that if the world was ending, I wouldn't really want to go traveling or skydiving or running naked through the streets. I probably want to just continue working, want to continue to be distracted by work and preoccupied by work so that I wouldn't have to think about the end and everything that entails. So that was sort of the seed that took root and became the show.
Really, it represents all of us doing things that just take our mind off our inevitable demise.
Exactly. So it's about a woman and her search for meaning, but more specifically, it's about a woman running away from having to decide what that meaning is, but her finding her purpose in the process.
Watching it, it occurred to me that this is basically the first animated show I've ever seen featuring a main character that's basically a comedy writer type of personality.
People have had really interesting reactions to the character of Carol. There's a lot of love for her. People really relate to her. There's also been some people who have kind of talked about her being a little bit autistic, which was interesting to me because Carol wasn't really meant to be autistic, but I'm on the spectrum. So maybe that kind of, seeped into the water a little bit.
Can we talk about that? I think I am on the spectrum, but have you been diagnosed as being on the spectrum?
Yeah. I'm very mildly on it, but I'm on it.
How did it present itself when you were a child? Was it detrimental?
I don't have very clear memories of being a kid. My memories more or less start as a preteen. I think I was just very quiet and to myself and very obsessive. Had a lot to say, but had a hard time saying it, is how I would describe it.
And how would you describe it as an adult now with being involved with comedy? Do you think it's advantageous in any way to have to be different, to think differently than others?
I think there's room for everyone and everything. I don't think anything makes anyone any more successful or ideal in terms of being a writer. I think different people have different strengths. That's why you can have all these different types of shows and all these different voices out there. I just write the way I write, and I write with my writing partner, Kevin Arrieta, and we have a pretty intense relationship, and our process is pretty intense. But there's something about when we combine my writing with his writing that it results in something that I feel like is a little bit special and a little bit different than what you typically see on TV. Carol and the End of the World was sort of left alone by Netflix, and we were allowed to really write it the way we wanted to write it and have it really be our voice.
You know, I suffer from OCD, and I've talked about this on the show. And I would say 75% of the humor writers that I've interviewed or comedians have suffered from OCD. Do you happen to suffer from it?
I have extreme OCD. I'm successful despite of it. I thought at one point that it was an advantage, that it made me better, but I think I'm good in spite of being OCD, because I think it gets in the way a lot of times. I'm very, very OCD. I don't like, to the point where when I write scripts, the lines of dialogue I can't leave an orphan on a line. The lines that on the page have to like be flush with one another, or else I can't move forward. So I will reword something in order to make the paragraphs or the dialogue lines butt up against each other and be flush.
Almost physical rather than the actual content of the writing. It needs to look a certain display.
Yes, it needs to look a certain way, or else I can't. Even at The Onion, when I was writing news articles, every paragraph had to end at the end of a line, or I couldn't. I wouldn't move forward with it.
But have you found, like I have, that the OCD kicks in? It can be negative. I used to have it in a lot of negative ways, but it's an energy that you can sort of siphon and use to your own benefit. If, for instance, I have to do work every day, and if I don't, I get obsessive and anxious and depressed. Do you find that there is a way to sort of funnel it into a positive direction?
I think there is. I think I'm still working on it, and trying to figure out how to rein it in a little bit so that it doesn't completely take over. But yeah, like anxiety and OCD are two big things in my life. And it is responsible for the reason why I write, and it gets me up in the morning to write, and it makes me want to write more. But it's also detrimental in many ways, and I think stands in the way of me being even like ever satisfied or happy with things. Yeah, I'm still working on figuring out how to best harness my OCD and my anxiety.
Martha, you're involved with comedy. You're stand-up, and you're a voice actress. Do you experience OCD, anxiety, depression, if I can ask this?
I don't think that I have OCD. I definitely struggle with depression and sometimes anxiety. And there are things that really help a lot, but it's also just for the benefit of anyone who's listening who has depression. Like, it's not like other illnesses where doctors can say this medication will work for what you have. It's like there's a bunch of different types of medications, and even when you find one that works, sometimes after years it stops working. So that is a struggle, but getting to work in a creative industry is like a joy, regardless of what other stuff I have going on mentally or externally. It's just really, I feel really fortunate, and it is consistently a source of joy and gratitude, which are really, good for fighting depression.
Right. Absolutely. That's what I've found. Just the act of creation every day is the only thing that really saves me from not getting up in the morning.
Right.
And it took a long time to discover that, but I think it's a good lesson for those who are starting off, that just the act of putting something out there that didn't exist earlier in the day, I think is it gives you a bit of a high. And I think it's, rather than circling the drain like I did for years with either anxiety, depression, and OCD, to sort of move forward is really the only way that I've discovered that can help this.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely.
Well, your performance in this, I just fell in love with it. I've never really heard, I don't think, an animated voice performance like this. Can you talk about where that came from? Is it from your own stand-up, your own acting, or was this something that was encouraged by Dan or anyone else?
It's hard to answer that. I mean, I think that my belief about every acting job I have, including animated voiceover, is that I just hope that I can do what the director wants and that I trust them to tell me if they want something different. And sometimes, I mean, definitely Dan directing, I would give the majority, if not all, the credit to him for that, because there were times when we'd be doing takes and many times I would say, can you do a line reading? Because I can hear and mimic how someone else says a line if it's, right away I'm doing it. And so I don't necessarily think that's really like an acting technique or talent. I think it's just wanting to do what the director would like.
Martha's being extremely, extremely modest. She was exceptional in the booth. In terms of line readings that we gave her, they were very few and far between. And not only, did I pick Martha from the beginning to be part of the show because I wanted her voice to represent Carol, but Martha is an extraordinarily good actress, and she was not only able to do the comedy of the show, but all the emotional stuff she was able to land beautifully. She was incredibly easy to work with and really inspirational, and the show really took off after we started to record her and hear what the show sounded like through her voice. It really helped us shape the rest of the season.
Did you write with her? You just said you wrote with her in mind. Is
yeah,
that...
I wrote the pilot for her. Halfway through the pilot, I contacted her and told her what the pilot was about, and I think sent her a few pages of it because Kevin and I really wanted her to be the voice of Carol. There was not really any sort of backup second choice option B. It was always kind of Martha or nothing is the way we felt.
So what was it about her sensibility that you wanted for this character?
I mean, she just has an incredibly funny deadpan, obviously, and just her voice quality. There's a humanity to it that's special. There's kind of a soul to her voice for a character like Carol, who had to express a lot in few words. You needed a voice that had those qualities to it.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a perfect fit. And to see that, oftentimes I'll watch something animated and it just doesn't jibe for me, the look or the feel of the character with the voice. But here it was just a bullseye.
Yeah, we were very deliberate with our design work as well. I don't know if you noticed, but in many times the character design looks a lot like the actor who's portraying the character.
Yeah.
And that was just me doing what I could to make sure that the voice fit the look. So we had Eric, who was a Michael Chernus character, looks a little bit like Michael Chernus, obviously doesn't look exactly like Michael Chernus, but has some resemblance to Michael. And I think Carol has some resemblance to Martha. And Luis definitely has some resemblance to Mel Rodriguez. It was by choice to draw upon the actors in our design work.
Yeah, and you wonder why that's not done more often. It's sort of a pet peeve of mine. But in this case, I thought it was absolutely seamless. Now, Martha, I was reading an interview with you, and I'm only going to bring this up is because you discussed it, but you talked about living with your parents a number of years ago, and your intention was to save up enough money to move back to Austin, Texas, to start a pet sitting business, which personally sounds like a dream for me to live in Austin and have a pet sitting business because I love animals. But what changed? Was there an occurrence where that sort of changed for you, where you went in another direction?
Yes, definitely. It was specifically Zach Galifianakis leaving me a voicemail in January of 2014 saying, I'm going to do a TV show and wanted to know if you wanted to do a part on it. And then he said, like, you probably don't, but give me a call if you do. And then said we offered the role to Tyrese, but he turned it down. So he just left me this goofy voicemail. And then when I called him back, I thought maybe it was like he was going to do a spot on a late night show and wanted me to be part of a sketch. But when he told me about baskets, I was very excited. Also, just I've known Zach a long time and I love him. So just excited to work with him. And then, yeah, that's what happened. And after it was a long time, like Dan said, it takes forever. So that was January 2014. We shot the pilot in May of 2014, and then we shot the remaining 9 episodes of season 1 in the fall of 2015. And then I moved back to Austin, and I moved back and forth for the next 4 years. So I'd come out here and rent like an Airbnb and shoot baskets and then go back to Austin and work on stand-up.
So how did you know Zach?
We met at an open mic in 98. And he had done an MTV show when he lived in New York, but he had moved out to LA within a year or 2 of meeting at the open mic. So that's when I started stand up, and he had been doing it maybe 3 or 4 years at that point. So
he remembered your sensibility and thought it would be a good fit for his new show.
Yes, we had, kept in touch over the years. So, but I was surprised. I had no idea that I still don't exactly know why he gave me that opportunity, but it definitely it's the reason for every other acting job I've had. I wasn't going on auditions and nor would I have ever voluntarily done that.
What was your intention, to stay in stand-up?
Yeah, I thought like, if I'm on a TV show, it can pay my rent for a while, and then it can also hopefully get more people to come see my stand-up. Like sometimes that happens with comics on TV shows, and I thought like it's a sorry, I have to separate my cats. They're
that's fine.
Sorry, one sec. Guys, you gotta okay. Sorry.
No, I like it. Are they fighting or playing?
It starts as playing, but one of them is kind of a gremlin, and he loves when I'm on Zoom or on the phone to start.
That's fine. I have 2 cats myself.
Oh, they're great. Yeah, I just thought it would help me financially, and it would maybe help my stand up, and it did both, but it also led to other acting jobs, and And if it wasn't Zach, I wouldn't have had the guts to try it. I just because I thought I would probably get fired during the pilot, but I also knew like Zach would not be mean about it, and that I had to try because it would be a great benefit if I didn't get fired.
Yeah, it really shows you sometimes it just takes one person on your side.
Yeah.
And
Sure.
you need someone on your side, and to be lucky enough in life to have that, I think is a great thing. But he must have seen something that he liked originally for him to keep in touch with you and want you involved later with his project.
I can't speak to that. I will just say that I love him, and he's the same person that he was when I met him in 98. I thought after The Hangover, maybe he would like change his number and everybody who knew him from stand-up would just lose touch with him, but he didn't change. And I'm not the only person that he met at the open mics back then that he's still friends with. He's just a very genuine person. But in terms of like one person being in your corner and changing your life, like I feel like with Dan, it's the same thing. It's like he just reached out to me, and I was a fan of his writing and followed him on Twitter, and he reached out to me about his idea, and I loved it and felt like I can't believe that he wants me to do this. So, and it was, it's been really fun, and I love the show. I love the end result. I can't say I love hearing my own voice ever, but I do love the writing and the animation and the other people's voices.
Dan, we've been friends for a while. I interviewed you for one of my interview books, and I'm familiar with your background, and it is not the typical Harvard Lampoon to Hollywood route that you took. Can you talk a little bit about how you went from where you grew up, which was Montreal, Canada, to where you are today?
I got very lucky. I found The Onion online in like 1998 when it was still really small and kind of underground and not really well known yet. And I fell in love with it. And I tracked one of the writers down online and found his email address, found his AOL Instant Messenger name, and kind of reached out to him and asked him if I could send them some headlines.
Well, who was this? What writer was this?
This is Tim Harrod.
Mm-hmm.
And he said, sure, which was surprising and exciting. And then I spent a week writing headlines and I sent them to him, and God bless him. He liked them or saw something in them that he decided to kind of sponsor me and be a mentor to me for a few years as I started writing for The Onion. And then from The Onion, I went over to the Colbert Report for 3.5, 4 years. And then from there, Dan brought me over to Community and Rick and Morty, where I spent 4 years with him. And then after those 4 years, I was brought in by Netflix to work on to consult on a few pilots, and then got to pitch Carol and the End of the World. So that was sort of my journey. And I had started doing stand-up very early on when I was sort of 17. But the moment that I started writing for The Onion, I got the hell off stage because I was so uncomfortable on stage.
Yeah.
That I was very happy to just write instead of perform.
Well, what impresses me is that doesn't seem to be connections. Like, this isn't a case where your father was in the business or you knew people you went to college with. This was just someone in his room working extremely hard for a long time alone, producing great material. And that material was recognized, and you've created a career out of it, which you used to see in the mid 20th century with writers who grew up on the streets, but it's not as common as it used to be. And that's always something that's always impressed me about your career.
Yeah, it's a bit of a weird path that I took. I didn't go to college. I went straight into writing comedy. I wish I had gone to college very often, and had some sort of backup, because it's even 20 years into writing comedy, it's still scary to be in the biz. It's just been people sort of either knowing my work or hearing about me and reaching out and just asking me to work for them is how I've gotten all my jobs.
Well, what I find interesting in both Martha's case and your case, Dan, is that collectively this seems to be what I'm always telling people to do: put your head down, do good work, but while also reaching out to like-minded people, because those are the people in the end who are going to possibly help you. And it seems that by doing that, both of you guys have gotten to where you are, which I think is a great piece of advice for those who are starting out. What interests me too is that you're, Dan, a master jokesmith. I mean, you have written for Colbert. You used to do amazing work at The Onion. You used to do, among other things, the horoscopes, which are just pure jokes, almost like little pieces of poems, no fat, all solid. But what interested me about Carol is that I never, and I was expecting it when you first showed me the script, this is not joke driven.
It's driven emotionally. I've kind of fallen away from joke writing. I think I got a little bit bored with it. And then when I met Kevin Arrieta on the Louis C.K. Albert Brooks project, I kind of fell in love with what Kevin was doing, which was doing a sort of naturalism. And I brought a sort of surrealism to the naturalism as we worked together. And the end result is this very kind of grounded, emotional, earnest, sweet, kind sort of show, and not joke a minute, joke a second, but more of a slow-paced, melancholy sort of mood and tone.
I'm finding that the older I get, the more I'm interested in that too. Did you find that this is, as you get older, there's less interest in cleverness, maybe, and jokes, and more into people, characters?
Yeah, and characters, and a lot in terms of character, and wanting to talk about stuff that's important to you, and not being as concerned about being as funny as you can be. I feel like I've proven myself on that end of things, and I wanted to try something new, and it's a direction that I really love. I think it's surprising for a lot of people who sit down and watch the show, because I don't think it's a tone that you see very often on television, where it's takes its time, it lets things breathe, and it's funny, but it's also sad, and it's sweet and surreal, and it's melancholy. It's got all different types of textures to it. And it's very earnest in what it's doing.
Right. And there's nothing wrong with being earnest. I used to think there was. But the older I get, I mean, the more I find it's important just to be good. Decency is better than cleverness, I think.
Yeah, as long as you're just being honest with yourself, and with the material, I think it connects with people in a way that's really satisfying. And I think the older I get, the more I just want that moment of that instance of connection with someone else, be it a viewer or a co-writer or, a designer on my show. I want to feel less alone. I want to feel more part of a community. And that's, I guess, the show is sort of a flare that I've shot up into the sky to try to find other like-minded people.
For both you and Martha, do you look at reviews, not only professional reviews, but reviews, say, left on IMDb? And does that affect you if it's a review that is not as positive as you might like?
Yes and yes. But as soon as I hit a review that hurts my feelings, I say that's enough for me. I've seen all I need to see here. And I just feel like people have a right to like whatever they like and dislike it, and they're not doing anything wrong to say the actress's voice is a monotone and irritating and I can't stand it. They're not committing a crime. They're just saying how they feel. But I don't have to seek out that. And it's worth missing possible nice things people are saying to not, because the one mean thing will definitely make me say, you know what, I don't even want to be in show business. I'm never doing this again. Let me get a day job. Like, so I try to keep it to a minimum.
How about you, Dan?
I'm in the same boat. I really wish I didn't look at reviews or reactions online, but I can't help it. I'm going to have to put a stop to it at some point because it's sort of taking over my life the last week. And just like Martha, like I would say 90 to 95% of the reactions online have been extremely positive and people really in love and obsessed with the show. But whenever every now and then there comes a comment where someone was not into it or was confused by it or wasn't what they expected, that's the thing that I remember rather than the other 80 gushing reviews. I remember the one person who was sort of dumbfounded by it. It affects me. I hate seeing it, but that's on me. That's my fault. I'm not reacting in a way that's healthy or, it's part of my OCD as well to like seek out everything possible about the show. But yeah, I definitely have been looking at everything and looking forward to stopping that very soon.
Now, we talked earlier about the years it takes to put into this project. Was there frustration on your part when Adam McKay's Don't Look Up was released? Did you feel that it might have taken away some of the spotlight of this project?
No, not at all. I think what he did was very different from what we're doing. What he did falls more within satire and social commentary, whereas we're really character driven and about existentialism. And I think there's a lot of different shows and movies about the end of the world. And there's room for us. We're doing something with it that's different from anyone else. So that didn't really bother me or spook me in any way.
Can you talk about, both Martha and you, Dan, the future of this character, of this show? Will there be another season?
I wrote it to be a self-contained one-season show, but there is the opportunity to come back if enough people watch it. And if we were to come back, I would come back and do like 3 or 4 specials and do it that way instead of another season. But there is the opportunity to come back, but it was also written so that it didn't end on a cliffhanger, so that it could feel like a self-contained piece with a beginning, middle, and end to it. Something that would pay off, that you could sit down and get a complete story from. So it was designed to work on its own as a one-season thing, but there is the door is not entirely closed.
And can you talk about your next project? You mentioned you're working on another. Is it an animated project?
It is an animated project, and it's taking what we did with Carol and pushing it even further. I did it with Kevin Arrieta again. It's called Weekend, and it's about this 13-year-old kid and the weekends he spends with his divorced dad, who's having a mental breakdown and a midlife crisis. And it's based 100% on my teenage years with my father, who lived out of town, and I would go to visit on the weekends, who was sort of losing his mind a little bit. So it's another very kind of quiet, sweet, tender, but also very funny show. Yeah, it's called Weekend. That's the next thing we're hoping to take out.
Thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
Thank you, Mike.
Thanks, Mike.
That's it for this episode of Doing It with Mike Sachs. I'd like to thank you for listening. I sincerely appreciate it. I'd like to thank Sonar for giving me this opportunity, and I'd like to thank the following for helping to make this episode possible. Rob Schulte, the world's greatest producer, and that ain't no lie. Performer and voice artist Martha Kelly, who is on Twitter, a very funny account, at Martha Kelly 3, the numeral 3. Dan Guterman, my friend, for taking the time to do what he doesn't like at all to do, which is talk about himself and his amazing work. So, until next episode, keep your feet on the ground and keep reaching for my junk, Jack.
You have just heard Red Nichols and his 5 pennies. This is one in a series of unusual entertainments brought to you by the Brunswick Balke Calendar Company of Chicago. Each week, great artists, wonderful orchestras are featured in Brunswick Brevities. Every artist whom you hear on these programs, you can enjoy over and over again on Brunswick Electrical Records.
Step on the gas. Put out your arm when you're ready to pass.
Girls to the left around the bars, put in your clutch and make some noise.
Pick out a cargo that you like and haul your honey up the pike.
Hug that shoulder. Grab that curve.
Bump that bumper if you got the nerve. I won't give her away, but I'm willing by heck to sell her for a certified blank check. Bring on the preacher, bring on the witness. I'm tired of making these silly calls, and I want to get out of my overalls.
Dearly beloved, we are gathered here to unite this couple for at least a year, so say I do.
I do.
That's groovy. Now you're married, go make your movie.
Hail to the bride.
Hail to the bride.
Spread out, folks, and make some room.
Hail to the bride.
Hail to the bride.
If my flicks make their money back, I could be bigger than Billy Jack. 10-4.
They will not stop rock and roll.
This is the way it is. Hey.